Hi, my name is Joel, and I'm a member of the Teen Advisory Board with Howard County Library System, and today I'm going to teach you about for loops in Python. I am also a member of the Centennial High School Pioneers, which is a school-based club whose goal is to teach people about coding. So, what are for loops? For loops are loops that go through every item in an interval, such as a list, a dictionary, or a range, and then does an operation. You can see on the right here what a diagram of a simple example of a for loop looks like. We start off with an iterable. In this case, we're using lists as our iterable. For lists, the for loop goes through the items in the list one by one, and for each item it does the given operation. In this example, the operation is simply to just print the item, so the output of this example would just be every element in the list on a new line. Let's look at an example of what for loops look like in Python. So here we see an example of a for loop in Python. The syntax for for loops are for iterator name in iterable colon and then whatever code you want to be inside of your for loop. Now you must make sure you have an indentation here to tell Python that this code is inside of the for loop and not outside. And if you don't have that indentation, you're going to come across many problems. Now, the name of your iterator can be any valid variable name, but it is best practice to make sure that it's not the same name as another variable or function outside of the for loop in your program. In this example, for each iteration of the loop, the iterator, which is this item variable, will be equal to the current item in the shopping list. And then this print statement will just print out that item. So the expected output for this code is to have each item in this shopping list printed on a new line. So let's see how it runs on Repl.it. So we're in Repl.it, and here we see the same example that we saw before on the slides, but I added a shopping list with 4 items for the loop to iterate through. As mentioned before, the expected output of this program is to have every element in this list printed out on a different line. So let's run it, and as we can see, it does exactly that. It prints out apples, eggs, bread, and milk, which are our 4 items in our shopping list. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you don't have to end up using this item variable in your code for your for loop, so I can just get rid of this and then type in hi or something and then run it, and this whatever's in here will just run once for every single item in this list because it's our iterable, and since there's 4 items in this list, it runs 4 times. Now let's look at all the iterables we can use with for loops. There are a multitude of different data structures that you can iterate through in Python. One of the most important iterables used in Python is the range iterable. Here we see an example of a for loop that uses range. What range basically does is create an iterable filled with numbers. If we do range 4, or in this case we have range 5, then the loop will have 5 iterations where the iterator starts at 0 and ends at 1 less than the number. So in this case that would be 4. And if we run that, we should see, there we go, it goes from 0 to 1 less than this number, which is 4. So that means it is exclusive of this number. It is important to remember that ranges start at 0 and, like I said before, are exclusive of the number that you input. Now there are other data types, and I'm going to put them all here. This pretty much encompasses all of the data types that you can use for loops in Python, and we can go through them one by one. So first off, we have lists, which if I add here, we've already gone over this basically. For loop just iterates through each item in the list, and if I run this, it'll just print all 3 of the items. Now the same thing happens for sets and tuples, so if I make this into set and run it, this is the set it's going through. But the thing about sets is they are unordered, so it might not always be in the same order. And then for tuples, it's pretty much also going to be the same. So if I put tuple there and then run it, it's going to print in order item 1, item 2, item 3, item 1, item 2, item 3. And then for dictionaries, you have to remember that it iterates through the keys and not the actual values. So if I put the dictionary here and then run it, it'll show item 1, item 2, item 3, because those are our 3 keys. And then finally we have strings, which for strings, the for loop just iterates through each character in the string. So if I run this, it'll print every single character in that string on a new line. So that's pretty much all of the data structures that you can use in for loops in Python. And let's move on to some questions before we can end the video. So I'm going to give you 2 challenges that I want you to do. I want you to, after I tell you what they are, pause the video, try them out for yourselves, and then come back and we can go over the answers. So my first challenge is, given this list, nums, write a loop that prints out each number in nums plus 2. So I'll give you a second to do that. And by now I hope you have paused the video and tried this out for yourself, and we can now go over the answer. So first thing we have to do is start off our for loop, and then we can just pick any iterator. So I'm just going to use x because it's simple, and then in, and our iterable in this case is nums, so we can put that there. And then what do we want to do? We want to print x, which is our iterator, and then plus 2. Now if we run this code, we see it prints each number in nums plus 2. So we should have gotten this, or at least something that gives the same output as this. Now let's move on to our next challenge. I want you to write a loop that prints the word hi 10 times, just like this. So I'll give you a second to pause the video. And by now I hope you've paused the video and then tried this out, and now we can go over the answer. So for this one, it's as simple as using a range. So for we can just use x again, and then in, our iterable is going to be a range, and then we want it to run 10 times, so we put 10 in there, and then we just print hi. So if we run this, we should see hi printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Alright then, that pretty much wraps it up for loops in Python. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.